The laughter started before I could even finish my sentence. It was my husband's brother's new boyfriend, glass in hand, smiling as he joked about my clothes, my accent, my simple job. People laughed because it was a wedding, and laughing was easier than stopping him. My husband's father leaned toward me and said quietly but firmly, "Stop making our family look bad." So I did exactly that. I stopped talking. I stopped reacting. I let them think the joke had landed. I watched faces relax. Confidence spread around the table. Then the boyfriend mentioned his work, casual and proud, expecting approval. That was the moment I reached into my bag and took out my phone. Not to argue. Not to defend myself. Just to check something. The room didn't go silent all at once. Smiles faded one by one. And I realized then, some people only feel powerful because they don't know who they're speaking to. I stayed seated while the band reset behind us and the waiters moved through the room pretending nothing had shifted. The boyfriend was still talking, explaining his position, his title, how hard it was to get noticed in his field. He hadn't realized yet that he had given me an opening. My father-in-law was watching me now, not with irritation but with caution. I didn't look at him. I looked at the phone screen. It had loaded faster than expected. I asked one simple question. I kept my voice even. I asked who he reported to. The boyfriend paused, laughed lightly, and answered. A few people leaned in. Not because of me. Because of the pause. I nodded as if confirming a detail. My thumb moved once. I turned the phone slightly, not enough for everyone, just enough for him. The color drained from his face before he said a word. He tried to smile again, but it didn't land. I didn't explain what was on the screen. I didn't need to. He already understood. His posture changed. Shoulders tighter. Words shorter. He glanced around, as if looking for support that wasn't there anymore. Someone asked what was wrong. He waved it off and took a sip of his drink, but his hand shook enough for the ice to clink against the glass. My husband's father cleared his throat. He asked what I did for work. It was the first time he had asked me directly. I answered honestly, using the same calm tone I'd used all evening. No titles. No emphasis. Just facts. A few heads turned. Someone across the table frowned, then looked back at the boyfriend. The connection was forming without my help. The music started again, louder this time. Conversation split into smaller groups. The boyfriend stopped talking altogether. He checked his phone twice, then put it face down. When he stood to go to the bar, he didn't make eye contact with me. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. He came back quieter and stayed that way. Later, during the speeches, my father-in-law leaned over once more. His voice had changed. It was careful now. He said he hadn't known. I told him there was nothing to know. That was true. I hadn't lied. I hadn't hidden anything. They had simply never asked. When the wedding ended, people said their goodbyes. The boyfriend left early. He said he wasn't feeling well. My husband and I stayed until the room emptied. In the car, he reached for my hand and squeezed it once. He didn't ask what I showed them. He didn't need to. Some moments don't require confrontation. They only require timing. I didn't win anything that night. I didn't take anything from anyone. I just allowed the truth to arrive on its own, and I let the silence do the work for me. The comment landed hard enough that a few people laughed before they realized they were supposed to stop. He said it lightly, like a joke everyone should understand, and waited for the reaction. It came. Not all at once, but enough. I felt the heat rise in my face and kept my hands folded in my lap. The room smelled like flowers and wine. Chairs scraped softly as people adjusted themselves, pretending this was still a celebration. My husband's father leaned toward me, his voice low and irritated, and told me to stop making his family look bad. I nodded once. I didn't respond. I focused on the condensation sliding down my glass. In that moment, I made a decision without drama. I wouldn't explain myself. I wouldn't defend anything. I would let the evening continue exactly as it was going and see where it led. Silence felt easier than correction. Someone asked how my husband's brother knew his new boyfriend. Another laugh followed. A detail here. A name there. Enough context to understand the dynamic without spelling it out. I stayed quiet, listening more than looking. The boyfriend grew more comfortable. His voice got louder. He started talking about his work, how competitive it was, how few people made it as far as he had. Heads nodded. Approval settled in. Confidence filled the space he'd created for himself. I reached into my bag slowly and took out my phone. No one noticed at first. I wasn't in a hurry. I searched once, then stopped. I waited until he mentioned a specific project. That was enough. Time stretched. The band played. Plates were cleared. I looked up and asked a single question about his job, simple and neutral. He answered easily. I turned the phone toward him, just slightly. He leaned in without thinking. Then his expression changed. The shift was immediate. His smile didn't disappear, but it stopped working. He straightened, glanced around, and tried to continue talking. The words came out thinner. Someone nearby noticed and went quiet. Another person followed. My father-in-law watched me closely now. I met his eyes for the first time that night. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The conversation moved on without him. Later, when people stood to leave, the boyfriend excused himself early. My father-in-law told me he hadn't realized. I told him there was nothing to realize. On the drive home, I thought about how little effort it had taken. I hadn't changed who I was. I had just waited. Sometimes that's enough. The night didn't end with an argument or an apology. It ended the way most evenings do, slowly and without ceremony. Chairs were folded. Glasses collected. The staff began clearing what was left behind. People spoke more softly now, as if the room itself had decided to settle. On the drive home, the road was dark and familiar. My husband didn't ask questions. He didn't need answers. His hand rested on the steering wheel, steady, unchanged. The city lights passed by in silence. Nothing had to be explained between us. Over the next few weeks, life returned to its usual pace. Family messages came through as they always had, but the tone was different. Polite. Measured. No one brought up the wedding. No one mentioned the moment. It sat there unspoken, doing its work quietly. I saw my father-in-law once after that. He was careful with his words. He asked about my work, listened fully, then nodded. There was no acknowledgement of before. Just a shift. Subtle but permanent. It was enough. As for the boyfriend, I didn't hear much. He remained part of the family, at a distance. Conversations around him stayed neutral. He avoided me without being obvious. There was no confrontation, no resolution that needed managing. The balance had already changed. What stayed with me wasn't satisfaction. It was clarity. I understood how quickly people make assumptions when silence gives them room. I also understood how fragile those assumptions are once facts enter the room. I didn't prove anything that night. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't raise my voice or demand respect. I simply allowed the truth to appear when it was ready. That was enough to reset the space I occupied. Some moments don't require action. They require patience. They require restraint. They require knowing when not to speak. I didn't leave that wedding feeling bigger. I left feeling lighter. As if something unnecessary had been set down and left behind. And sometimes the most lasting change happens not when you respond, but when you let the silence finish the sentence. I didn't replay the moment in my head afterward. There was nothing to rehearse or reframe. It had already passed in the only way it could have. The situation didn't grow larger with time. It shrank. That's how I knew it was finished. At work the following Monday, nothing had changed. My desk was the same. The emails were the same. The decisions still needed to be made. That normality mattered more than any reaction at the wedding. It confirmed that my life wasn't built on approval. It was built on consistency. Family conversations became shorter. Not colder. Just more precise. People chose their words. Questions were asked instead of statements made. I answered when it made sense and stayed quiet when it didn't. That balance held. I noticed how often silence works when it's not used as punishment. Silence, when chosen deliberately, has weight. It removes the audience. It leaves people alone with their assumptions. Most of the time, those assumptions don't survive. There was no follow-up discussion about what I showed on my phone. No one requested clarification. That absence told me everything. They understood enough. Anything more would have been unnecessary. My husband mentioned once that things felt different. Not tense. Just clearer. Roles had shifted slightly. Not dramatically. Enough to matter. I agreed and left it there. I didn't become more visible in the family after that night. I became more defined. People adjusted around that definition without being told to. That's how real change usually happens. I didn't need validation from the people who laughed. Their reaction had never been the point. What mattered was that I didn't compromise myself to correct them. I didn't explain something that wasn't owed. The wedding became a reference point without being discussed. A quiet before and after. Not because of what I did, but because of what I didn't do. Some situations test whether you'll rush to be understood. Others test whether you're willing to let misunderstanding collapse on its own. This was the second kind. I learned that night that composure isn't passive. It's active restraint. It's choosing timing over impulse. It's trusting that facts don't need decoration. I didn't walk away feeling superior. I walked away feeling finished with something that had never really belonged to me. And when I think back on it now, the most important part wasn't the moment their smiles faded. It was the moment I realized I didn't need them to understand me for the truth to remain intact.